Thank you, Michael. And for everyone, that was Michael Imus. He's one of our Heartfelt coaches, and that was just beautiful. I can't think of any words that can do a better job at getting us to what it is we're looking for. So I just want to welcome everyone. I'm so happy to see so many familiar names that have joined and some that we don't know. So we'd like to welcome you if this is your first time to Heartfelt Presence or Three Principles. And we have Dave Banks with us, the son of Sid Banks, and Jim Beck, who was one of the original students, original. So I just wanted to welcome them and thank them so much for coming on and doing this for all of us. And so I'm just going to turn it over to Dave and Jim. And we have a recording for you from Sid right now, and we'll have another one at the end of the meeting. So I hope you enjoy that too.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us this conversation. I'm looking forward to this. I've known Jim for many decades, since I was a young boy, actually. He was, as far as I can tell, my father's first student on Salt Spring Island. He can perhaps tell you how that happened, but it's a beautiful story. But in any event, it's a real pleasure to be here, and thank you, Linda, for hosting all this. And over to you, Jim.
Thanks, David. Thanks. I'm going to extend my thanks to Linda and Theo and David and Michael, actually, for allowing this to happen, creating it, putting your energy behind it, heading us towards a great success. We have a fantastic opportunity today. We have an incredible group of people in the room. I want to thank everybody that's in the room for being here. The byline on this talk was the early days with Sydney Banks and the spiritual journey. And the piece of tape that we're going to listen to by Sid that's coming up next is a fabulous representation of that. And not only that, but it carries the truth. It's a tape that delivers pure truth. And as individuals and as a collective group, we have an opportunity to raise our consciousness right now. And I appeal to everyone that's watching to take those words to heart. We need your energy. We can raise our consciousness in the room. It's not a big deal. Just focus on the words and let them flow by you. Listen for a feeling, and we can't go wrong. And when I say doing that, I mean, please, let's get into the now, right now. Oh, let her rip.
The tape you're about to hear was made when Sid was speaking at Shawnigan Lake to a bunch of the Foundation people, and on the other side is when he spoke to the Victoria Centre. They were both made in July of this year, 1977.
What you've got to look for is spiritual facts, not spiritual beliefs that you've read or you've heard from somebody else. You look for a spiritual fact, a fact that comes from within you. And if you hang on to your old beliefs of the past, of how to attain this knowledge, then you're going nowhere. Because if you're going anywhere at all, you'd have been there a long time ago if you already had that knowledge. So you've got to start to realize you don't know as much as you think you know. Huh? Then you start listening to spiritual facts, because it is a spiritual world. It really is. It truly, truly, truly is a spiritual world manifest by thought via a superconscious state that lies within you. And that superconscious state is known as Christ consciousness. You see, all you have to do is listen and hear or see a spiritual fact, then the belief changes into a fact. And the difference between a belief and a fact is a belief is dead. A fact, when seen and heard, the breath of the very essence of life itself is put into that belief, and then it reflects and changes into an absolute fact. This is touching, for the first time, the Christ consciousness that lies within. When you start to realize this, you start to realize there's nothing to do to find your happiness. All you have to do is live. And the spiritual realities which you are tapping will take care of you. Because you are a microscopic part of the whole. And because there is no separation from the whole, you are. And all you're doing is handing over your ignorance of yourself to your inner self to realize that the inner self was what we call Christ consciousness, which is attached to what we call God, which is all one. Mankind, Christ consciousness, and God are all one. The only thing that separates them is our mind with the ignorance of its own divinity. What we see, we think is real. And it is real. Because it is a separate reality. It is a reality we call life. But the creator of this reality, as we know, is inside. Because it is a spiritual reality that lies within, which is the creator of all things on earth, which is known as God, reflecting and playing his game via a conscious state, which every living soul has and is at all times. You see, the word is a very beautiful way to guide people home. But the word itself means nothing. It's beyond the word. Because when truth leaves the mouth, the second it leaves the lips, it is no longer a fact. It is no longer truth. It's a belief. It's a concept. It's an idea. This is how truth is hidden from mankind. It's a perfect game. Because you can't hear it from your mind, from your own thoughts. You must clean your mind and let the past, which is controlling you now, let it drop away and see here and now. Because seeing here and now is the only time you will ever see the true meaning of Christianity, or the true meaning of finding yourself, or the true meaning of finding God, or the true meaning of what life really is. It's you see, the beauty of seeing this, as soon as you start to see spiritual facts, then you start to see the world in a clearer, more understanding, more loving way. And as you start to see the world in a more loving and understanding way, then your insecurity and your fears and your jealousies and your hate and all your negative behavioral patterns will stop, because you will start to see what is. You'll see the beauty that really lies in every living soul, the oneness. You'll start to see the spiritual facts. As you start to see them, your life will become what you really want it to be, because you'll start to realize that you are the creator of all things. Not you as a body, you as an inner self. From here, the creation inside you. Inside lies the secret to all problems in the universe. Really, you don't have to go anywhere or listen to anybody, because you have the secret. You have the absolute within you at all times.
So I'll just say a few words about that particular recording at Shawnigan Lake. Firstly, Jim and I were both there. I was very young. It's a beautiful setting on a resort on a lake on Vancouver Island. And it's very special to me as well, because the person introducing the tape is actually my late mother, Barbara. And there's only a small handful of recordings that have her voice on it. And this was a weekend event in the summer of 1977. And I can still remember it. Even though I was very young, I can still remember it very vividly. It was a very powerful talk that my father gave, and there was water skiing and tennis, and all. People were just in a wonderful state of mind. And that's how I remember the event. Jim, can you add anything to that?
I have the same sort of memories, David, of the event. It was the kind of thing that your dad did, or had us organize, or organized a few times. And they were full of fun, and also they were very ordinary. It was like a family holiday or a family weekend, and that was kind of juxtaposed with this incredible spiritual talking that Sid was giving during that weekend. To be honest, listening to the tape now, and when we listened to it last night, it's hard to speak for me. I feel really touched by what I've just been privileged to listen to, what we've all just been privileged to listen to. It's like, how do you follow pure truth? But we do have a series of events that is still to come in this talk, and there's going to be a follow-up at the end of this session that continues on for another 10 minutes or so. And I look forward with great anticipation to hearing what comes on that, because to me, the level is shot high from the words of Sid. So direct, no punches pulled, right to the point. And in a way, there we have the term coming out, Christ consciousness. And that hit me when I heard it last night. Christ consciousness, not religion, but Christ consciousness. What Christ consciousness means is the consciousness that Jesus went to when he had his enlightenment experience. And the consciousness is that level of consciousness that comes through enlightenment. And what he saw was the mind of God. And that is what Sid's talking about. And Sid is an enlightened being. and he knows what he's saying when he talks Christ consciousness, and the awareness of the feeling of the experience of the mind of God, and knowing that what he means when he's talking the mind of God is what Sid talks about when he has mind, consciousness, and thought. And that mind is something that encompasses everything that we can conceive. It encompasses every thought that we can have, everything we do. Every member of humanity is part of that mind, and we are all connected to it through our inner voice, which is another point that Sid was talking there. I hate to really be bringing some kind of analysis onto Sid's work, but this is what we are learning, and we all have that inner voice. That inner voice is our connection to the mind of God, to what we call mind. We tend to pull the word God out of it a lot because some people shut down when they hear that word. Other people open up, and we don't really need it. Mind is sufficient, and in fact, as we pursue it further, we get into knowing this through feeling, because when we know, we contact our inner self, we are doing it through feeling. And when we get a thought that appears to be coming from nowhere, that we recognize as truth or the right thing to say at that moment or whatever, that is coming through a feeling, and then we apply that feeling to the thought that comes with it, or the thought that we were projecting, and so that's how we function. Our from cradle to grave, to quote your father, we are on a journey, and that's that spiritual journey. And that journey is a journey of increasing consciousness. And the higher the level of consciousness goes, the closer we are to coming to our destination. That doesn't mean our journey's over, actually, if and when we reach this destination, and we will sometime. It may not be this lifetime, but that's where we're headed. And that is the ultimate level of consciousness that we talk about, is an enlightenment experience. And that is what he's referring to when he uses the phrase Christ consciousness. But the feeling that accompanies this is a feeling of unconditional love. And if we want to boil it down, if we simplify it, we have the three principles: universal mind, universal consciousness, universal thought, and those principles become one. And that oneness includes everything. When we have mind, it includes all of us, everything, and our awareness of it is our consciousness. Thank you, by the way, to everyone that's here for bringing your consciousness and contributing to the collective consciousness of this moment, and in fact to humanity. Your sound is on, Dave.
I think we'd both agree, Jim, that we both feel very privileged to have spent as much time as we did with my father.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was, a rare privilege indeed.
Mm-hmm.
And I know people tend to get hung up on words a lot, and language, but you will remember he emphasized many times to be careful of that, cautious of that it was about the feeling and beyond the words, and don't get too hung up on the language, whether it's universal mind or divine mind or whatever. And of course, the language did change a little bit over the years, but the message was still the same, and the message is still as timeless as it was then. It's just as powerful today as it was that summer day in 1977. And that's the beauty, that even though he's no longer with us, those teachings remain as a gift to humanity. And it's something that people can, treasure and for years to come, hopefully.
Beautifully put, David.
Mm-hmm. He always said that whatever he learned in that experience that day in our living room on Salt Spring was not his to own. It was a gift to him, and that he felt a very strong sense of duty almost to share it and pay it forward.
Mm-hmm. And
that it was through that process of sharing that it would stay alive, and so that's why he really emphasized the importance of sharing the feeling with others, and just living it in your life as well. I mean, not just as an abstract concept, but actually
right.
Living it, and that process that would continue to heal himself and also heal others.
Do you mind if I share my story, Dave?
Yeah, sure.
The day I met Sid Banks. It can be so long. I'm going to try and shrink it a little bit.
It's a great story.
Yeah, I wasn't aware that even when I was in depression, I was barely aware that I was, depressed, but I certainly was at the time that I ran into your mom and dad. And I'd had a failed mission over in Vancouver. I'd left Salt Spring on my own, trying to raise some money to finish off our little home. And for Pam and I to carry on with our lives, and quite likely that would have been done separately. We were growing apart rather than growing together. But that's beside it. That's just to paint our picture. I was on a ferry late at night, coming home from that failed mission, and I was in a state of agitation, walking the decks. Kind of crazy, really. And at any point, the boat stopped at various places, and it stopped at Main Island. It picked up a few more people on their way to Salt Spring, and so there was a few new bodies in the room, and it was easy for me to see that, since I'd walked that deck 10 or 15 times already. But I entered the front stateroom, and in front of me, I saw, two new people. They were sitting in the front row. I was coming in at the back of the room. Their backs were to me, and what I saw it stopped me in my tracks. And it was not what you would expect in terms of what I saw. It was two tired people on the boat, finishing their journey at around 11:30 at night in the dark. But what struck me was the love. The two heads were together, like you often see, or not often, but occasionally see people who are comfortable with each other, maybe parents and their children, or a couple. And this was to me, an older couple. They were older than I was. They were, around in their early 40s. But the love was undeniable. And I lost my, self-importance, in a sense, to explore this, rather than to mull over my racing mind that I couldn't even sit down. So I had to take a look, and I had to walk around in front of these guys and see who are these guys? What's going on here? I didn't make contact. I just stole some energy, you might say. That's what it was. The journey ended. I had no ride home, no vehicle. It was about midnight. I walked to the edge of the parking lot where the last light was before it went into blackness, and I stuck my thumb out, and cars came by, and this old, 49 GMC pickup truck pulled over and offered me a ride, and I got in, and here it was Sid and Barb, the people that I had seen in love. And that began a night of the night that changed my life, you might say. How are you doing, says Barb. I spill my guts. They're compassionate and kind. And then Sid starts talking about who knows what. Would you like an answer, or is there something that we can help you do, or this and that? And I can't remember. But by the time we got to my driveway, I said, "Come on up. I want to hear more. Let's go. I'd like my wife to hear what you're talking about." That must have been something pretty good. They did it, tired as they were, because Sid was in a place where not too many people were saying, "Tell me more." Barb had heard, she had changed, and that was wonderful. The people that they just left on Main Island, that was her brother and brother-in-law, or sister-in-law rather, and they were intrigued. So that was, starting to happen for them. But there was Sid and Barb. Of course, Sid jumped on it. He wanted somebody to hear him. He had been looking for at least 10 months, and people were not responding. It was not resonating. They could not get past the fact that they knew Sid and who the old Sid was. And even though some people had, couldn't recognize him, they still hadn't given up their idea of who Sid Banks really was, and that this was, temporary or whatever. But they certainly weren't giving him the opportunity to talk about this sort of thing. So they came up, we talked, we had long conversation. I'm saying a couple of hours. This was in the dark in this little log house that we lived in. And in the end, they had departed. They invited us over to their place. Sid was interested in us. And the thing that I think I responded to most at that time was, in one of the moments during this evening, he and I were standing together, and he confided in me that what they were looking for was a friendship. He was concerned that Barb had concerns that when they moved to the island, they wouldn't have any friends. And Sid confided that to me. And that, in my arrogance, I thought I was helping Sid, Of course, it was totally, the other way around. And, but in fact, I was Sid's friend until he passed away. We didn't always live in the same place, but we lived in the same place a lot more than anybody else, because when we were living in Hawaii for 5 years, Sid was there. And there was a couple, other couples, 2 or 3, one particularly, that were great friends of ours. And so we weren't the only ones. But we were very fortunate to be there for Sid during that time. And then at other times, it would just be visits, weekends, going to talks or workshops that were happening that we were invited to go to and enjoyed. And in the early days, my wife and I did an incredible amount of sharing to people who, were searching, and we had changed. So we were examples of change, and that was beneficial for Sid, that it was not just what he's talking about or what he said had happened to him, but there were others around who had changed as a result of what he was sharing. And of course, newcomers coming in were looking for that. So that was, you know, a wonderful time in our lives when we were sharing the most. And it was a spiritual sharing that was going on. More, the language is more directed to the kind of thing that we heard on that tape, as opposed to what can be termed the psychological approach. It does not mean it is less valuable, or that it is not talking in the direction of spirituality. But Sid was taken by the suffering that was going on in the world, and he knew that what he had to offer would alleviate this suffering wherever it could be heard. And he also realized that some of the suffering and the suffering people that were going for help were really led into deeper suffering in the psychological, you know, the profession of psychology. So he struck out to help psychologists, help heal psychologists, so they would be in a position to truly help heal their patients. So that, you know, that's what I've got to say at this point.
There's a couple of neat things about that story, Jim. One, if I got it right, is that you, my parents, and Linda Quiring were actually sitting in proximity to each other on that ferry that day and didn't know each other.
Yes, true. And I don't know that I've talked to Linda about it, and I don't know that she actually remembers that. But when I left, my last turn around, and I had seen Sid and Barb, and then I carried on back through the boat. I never completed the next circuit. There was some interesting people that seemed open, and there was an open seat, and I sat down, and a couple of people were playing chess, and it was a, you know, and it was Bill and Linda and friends of theirs that were in those chairs. I remembered them talking about where they lived, who they bought their property from, which was a name familiar to me. And then later, maybe a month later, I don't know, after Linda had met Sid, we met again. Well, we didn't talk about that ferry ride, really.
You were all on a spiritual journey, whether you realized it or not.
That's true, David.
And maybe it was just serendipity that you came together like that.
Yes, it could have been, but serendipity often can be connected to mind. You know, the idea of mentoring by mind and opportunities that appear appear out of nowhere. Perhaps not. Perhaps you know, there's a greater force at work.
The other thing that's neat about
go ahead.
The other thing that's neat about that story is your house was under construction, and you had as you told me the story, that you had an extension cord going over to the neighbors for electricity, and it had been unplugged.
That's right.
And so your first meeting with my mom and dad was actually with kerosene lamps, right?
That's right. And this was, you know, late at night, and God bless Pam. I pulled her out of bed. You know, and it wasn't that big a place, and she was like, you know, she was a little bit pissed off actually. And then I picked up this lamp, and it was the kind with mantles, you know, little gauzy things. And these were broken in this lamp, but I fired it up anyway. I pumped it up and lit it, and it did take a light, and it was a fluttering light. It was very very strange, really. That's where we were at that time.
It sounds very romantic, but and then the other thing that people need to know is that because of that, you know, a chance meeting that you had with my parents, you started having meetings at your house on, I think it was Friday nights, if I remember. I was at many of those myself, and those I can remember were really special. And that's where the very first original students would meet, was at your house on those Friday nights.
And your house too, David.
And in our place as well.
And that was, you know, Sid wanted this. He had actually he had mentioned something about it that first night, and we had talked about, you know, certain people, and he brought in another couple that I had mentioned because Sid had been talking a little bit about enlightenment. I knew nothing about enlightenment. It was a total foreign idea to me. But actually, I had in a couple of weeks before that heard the word, and that was because I was visiting this other couple, and they had a book about an East Indian mystic, and he apparently was an enlightened being. Mm-hmm. So I brought that out to Sid that there was, I'd heard it from this other couple, and Sid immediately was curious. And so we actually, within a week or so, went to visit them. They lived in a teepee. And I don't know whether you recall it, Dave, but you were on that journey, that walk-in. It was about a half-mile walk-in on a trail to get to where they were. Your parents were there. I carried my little girl on my shoulders, and mm-hmm. The little boy walked, holding Pam's hand. And what was beautiful about it, to talk about the kindness and unconditional love your folks lived in. Your mom was carrying a big pot of stew to bring in to these folks, and vegetarian as though they seemed to be, they were very grateful to have this brought to them. They were living in primitive conditions in there. Their stove was one of these airtight heaters, a little thin tin stove and so on, and that heated the teepee, and it also was what they cooked on. But the kindness just in that, in that presentation touched me. And so they became part of the group, the Friday night group. But before the group started, Sid had actually put an ad in the local newspaper, the Gulf Islands Driftwood. And it was mentioning that he wanted to start this group, a Friday night group, and based on higher consciousness. And he also put in it that this group would be conducted by a person who was himself enlightened. And the result of that was a meeting. People responded, and the couple from the teepee came, and acquirings came, and the family, Dave and Carol, Barb's brother and wife, came from Main Island, and so that was we were all there, and as I say, there was about 20, and in the end, there was many challenges came up. Who do you think you are? This kind of thing, and Sid fielded them. That doesn't mean that they changed their mind, because they were looking for the other side, that you're a fake, not that you are real. And so the result was that it was 8 people plus Sid and Barb and Grandma Mary, and others joined in as they progressed. And the beautiful thing about Sid, for these meetings, this is a guy that people would, if they really knew, as they know of Sid now, they would give a lot. They would walk a long ways to have a meeting with Sid Banks.
Right.
Sid would come down before the meeting at your place, and he would bring your sister, Susie, and she was our babysitter, so that we were free to come down to the meeting. And that is the kind of kind act that your father was, I would say notorious for kindness. And I imagine, and while we would go down to this meeting, and Sid would talk, about whatever. He would like questions, and we were quite willing to answer questions because we were pretty confused. And his daughter was over at our place looking after our kids and cleaning up our house for us. So that's kind of a win-win-win-win for us, at least. But that was, he was a wonderful guy. I have to say that, and we were incredibly privileged to have that kind of contact and attention. And it grew from that, Dave. It started to be more people later. But the format for that meeting and those meetings, a lot of it was based on Linda Quiring's first book. We'd have the meeting on Friday night, and And then her and Sid would get involved writing some pages during the interim. And the next time we were there, we would hear what had been written, and we had more food for thought, or more fodder for discussion, and leading to more growth. So we were privileged to be around at this time. We knew we were privileged. We used to talk amongst ourselves. I wonder what it would be like in 50 years when they make this movie of Sid's life, and we joke about that. Well, the opening scene will be this, going through that tunnel of trees down to this house, and emerging from it will be this old half-ton truck, and it'll park at the front, and Sid will get out his jeans and his jacket, and it'll be, this is the enlightened guy, And I remember your mom joking, saying, I think Sean Connery should play Sid. And it was like that, and that has never never come to pass. But that was gives you an idea of we knew we were into something that was super important, super big. And
well, my recollection of it, Jim, as a young boy was, I'm looking at it through the lens of a young child, really. But even then, I knew there was a very special energy there. And what I saw was a group of human souls, all in search of a spiritual answer. And the sense of camaraderie, and the sense of the feeling of love, and it was just a very powerful energy. That's difficult to actually explain to people.
It is, Dave. It was there constantly. And we'd hit these Friday nights. I think they lasted about 3 months. They actually never ended, but that phase of it, the book got written, that phase of it. And so it was, then out of that, he moved on to his first public talk, and so on. But when we'd come out of these Friday nights, we were absolutely on cloud nine. We would be so elevated in feelings of love and well-being and safety, home, and those feelings as other words to describe the great feelings of unconditional love. And it would be, Sid would, hug us as we left, and it would be, go out and enjoy yourself, share it, go out and share it. Well, we did that. But what we shared was not talking about truth particularly. It was sharing the feeling. And we were sharing love. And we were so loaded with love for anybody and everybody that we knew on the island. And we'd wake up the next morning and, we'd put the kids in the back of the car and we'd head off. And it would be like, all right, we had some, errands to run, but those errands were full of interactions of loving, happy, excited, caring, kind behavior.
And just in love with life, right?
Absolutely. And we had no worries. We had no worries in the world. We didn't know where the next $10 was coming from. And we just knew we were covered. We knew we were taken care of, and we always were, and it got better and better. And that is, an example.
And I guess you'd call that faith, wouldn't you? Yeah. You had to have, people really didn't have, a lot of them didn't have much in the way of material
exactly.
goods, but there was this faith in the spirit that it would work out in the end,
Yes, for sure. Yeah. That's definitely true. And it did. And it did.
Yeah.
How close are we to the question? Is there a question segment coming up here now?
Or a comment, either one.
Comments, yes. Oh no, we have more. We have a lot more time to go here. All right, let's.
Well, we could take some questions and comments now, Jim.
Let's do it.
With that.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to start with that, people can. I have everyone in gallery view. Just raise your hand, and we'll we'll open up what Wendy had asked.
Hello. Thank you so much for hosting this lovely event. I really appreciate it. I'll tell you, when you were speaking, Jim, about the good feeling, and
Yes.
this was the first time, maybe I'm dense, but I've been following this conversation for about 4 or 5 years now. This is the first time that I ever recognized that good feeling that I have is meant to be of service. It is not meant for me to sit around and go, aren't I just chill? Doesn't life feel great? I'm so glad to be in higher consciousness. And I just can't tell you how much I appreciate that. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that.
Well, thanks so much for saying that. That's powerful words. It's really a great observation, and I think it can be taken to heart by all, really. Nice. It's a nice feeling for you, and it's nice to share.
And that was also the message of my father. He was in service, totally, 100% in service to others, and the message was, go out and be in service. You go out and be in service to others, and in doing so, you will reap spiritual benefit from that. Yeah,
sure. That's exactly how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sharing is the way to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And I can testify to that. Throughout the decades that I began sharing during the first 4 or 5 years, and the first 2 or 3 years, I was really on fire, you might say. Pam and I were, and then we left the island and made furtive efforts to share, which were sort of not caring about the people that we were wanting to, as we put it, share, not respecting where they were, not respecting that they may not be ready to hear this. And we ended up closing up a lot, and the sharing was between us, and when we went to Sid's events, and when Sid was around, of course, and our family and our friends, and in our jobs with students that we were working with. But it was on that level of service as opposed to guidance inside. And really, the thing that's put a fire under me recently has been this Heartfelt Presence website, which has given me an opportunity to talk to people who want to listen. And it's made all the difference for me. And I felt myself coming alive, reawakening, and growing tremendously in my own level of consciousness, which I am incredibly grateful for. And I pay homage to Heartfelt Presence almost every hour that I spend on it, because that's one of the main things I have to share with the people that come in the room is, if you want it to carry on, you want to go deeper, you've got to indulge in sharing and be of service and share what you're learning. And that is the best thing that you can do.
And Jim, we talked about this the other day. I think is that there's sometimes a misunderstanding of what that means.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean you have to share in some formal capacity, as a counselor or something like that. But what he meant by that was just to live it, live the spirit with in the way. Just share it in your life, no matter what you're doing. It doesn't really matter.
That's right.
What your vocation is, or, but I think it's Bill Pettit once said that he was working in a psychiatric hospital, and the person who made the most difference, positive difference, and healed more than anyone else was a cleaning lady who worked in the hospital, who had this tremendous, loving, positive attitude. And she would go in and she would just cheer everyone up.
Absolutely.
Well, she's she's sharing it, you know, that's just,
Oh,
she's
yeah.
living it and she's sharing it. And that's what he was talking about when he said
Absolutely.
sharing.
And it brings to my mind my sister, my late sister Iris, who was loved by everybody that she met, and loved them all and understood them, and saw where they were coming from, forgave any foibles, and was right there to help if they needed it. And you know, for me, it showed me that even though she was not listening to truth, not searching, not trying to grow in consciousness, she had such a wonderful understanding and level of consciousness through her loving behavior. And it really, I always knew she had something, but it helped me realize more how deep she really was. Yes, for sure, David. Live an ordinary life. All the benefits are right there in an ordinary life. And I know even, you know, Sid strove for that ordinary life. In some ways, it was kind of put on hold when there were so many people, you might say, invading his space, coming down the driveway and, you know, wanting to talk. And Sid was always available, you know, to do that. But he was giving up precious family time when he was doing that. And at a certain point, the Friday night stopped. And they started to happen at one of the local churches on Salt Spring. Sid and Barb did not come. There might be a tape, but it would be conducted by others of us. And there had been, by that time, a fairly large community that had moved to Salt Spring, probably about 50 people. And so that was a chance for Sid and Barb to start to normalize, which is what they created. He was always a kind, loving guy. He was always living, you know, living what he knew. The stories that we were talking about of the Secret Santa at school, you know, making sure everybody had Christmas gifts at the local school and doing so anonymously, nobody know who it was. Or that when you were sharing with me about that single parent mother, a young lady that was having a heck of a time making ends meet, and Sid got wind of it and would secretly leave groceries on the doorstep when she wasn't home. It never wanted to be known for it, but he was kind and loving, and yet wanting to live, you know, he was living as an ordinary guy.
The message, Jim, was always to stay in a state of grace. And as long as you're in that state of grace, you can't help but be in service to others. And and you know, in that case of that young single mother, I knew her, and I didn't know my father even knew her, actually. And one day she said to me, somebody keeps dropping groceries on my front door. And she was having some mental health issues as well. She had 2 young children. And I said, oh, really? She said, yeah, it's been going on for ages. I don't know who it is. I come home and there's these bags of groceries there. And I said, wow, that's interesting. I found out quite a bit later that it was my father who was doing that. I didn't.
That's something.
Yeah, it's a neat story.
I love that story. And
we have a couple of questions. If you want to take one from Marlene.
Thanks, Theo. Thank you, Jim and Dave, for this wonderful, insightful conversation. I think I heard you say something, Jim, about how the conversation moved eventually from kind of more of a, we might call it spiritual, to the kind of the psychological. Was that Cindy Banks' intention, that he began to speak more in the language of psychology because the psychologists were already coming to Salt Spring, or he anticipated them coming? So I'm just curious about that.
I believe he knew they were coming. His experience happened in you might say a psychological venue, and he was aware of what was going on with psychology, And he saw the power, it wasn't only psychology. He wanted to reach teachers. He wanted to reach any of the service professions. But psychology, definitely, it was in the works. And one of the first places that he did outreach was, was to University of BC and psychologists in that department. And there was one fellow that did pick up a bit on it and came out to Salt Spring to check it out, and was, he played a certain role in Sid making contact with other psychologists, I believe, and most definitely he wanted. And as to whether he knew they were coming, he certainly had the door open, put it like that. His radar was up for that. And but anybody that was in a service position to be helping others, Sid wanted to zero in on that, because Sid wanted to help humanity. He wanted to alleviate the suffering in humanity, the suffering that we see. He has. It's still going on, and it will go on ad infinitum, in my opinion. What he started. Psychology is changing, and the psychologists that have changed are very brave. I say very brave souls, because it takes a lot to have a look at. You go to university, you put in however many years, 4 years, 6 years, however, and you come out and then you start using what you've learned and the various techniques. And you find they're not working. A lot of people can't really even admit that it's not working, because they know, what else am I supposed to do? And we're on a hit and miss kind of basis, often taking decades for somebody to finish their therapy. And Sid knew that was all nonsense. But these psychologists that were open enough to realize that it wasn't working, and they were willing to look at something else that might work. Their training was not for naught, because it gave them the opportunity to address the suffering, and to be able to find something new that really worked to help alleviate that suffering. And so patients could be, really it's possible to be out of there in one session. But they could be out of there in 3 months, and beyond, sometimes beyond their therapist. So, it's not a personal thing. In fact, people are, they're all acting in innocence. They are dedicated. I say they. I'm not a psychologist, but we're all human. And they have what I call a high-minded view on life, in that they do want to help humanity themselves. And for them, physician heal thyself. The psychologists can click into 3 principles. And if you've read Enlightened Gardener and Enlightened Gardener Revisited, you get a good glimpse of what's the potential there for them. And it'll be wonderful when there's a university faculty that there's 3 principles as a process that they want to teach and explore and teach and share.
Jim, I'll give you my take on it. So I think it really started with Roger Mills, when Roger first arrived on Salt Spring in the late 70s. Mm-hmm. And the transition took place around 1978. Now, I think there are 2 reasons why my father was interested in that shift. The first one was that he felt very strongly that he wanted this healing to be available to young people. And he recognized that in a more formal setting, like in a teaching setting, university setting, that was one way in which he could access more young people. The second reason was that he was really alarmed by the amount of damage that the profession was doing to people. He had so many people come to him who had suffered from mental health and had been made worse or exacerbated by the professional services they got. So he felt very strongly about that it was actually a disservice to people, and it was harming people. And he felt an obligation to try to change that.
That's right. And one of the first people that came down the driveway had been somebody that had, I think it was like 6 or 7 shock treatments and medicated, all the way up, and maybe 7 or 8 different kinds of medications. This I don't know exactly, but after a few hours, really, with Sid, the medication was dropped, and the person was, you would say, whole again, was well.
That's beautiful. Michaela, did you have a question?
Thank you both.
You're welcome.
Hi there. First, thank you so much for doing this. I truly feel grateful to be privy to this intimate conversation. What kind of struck me in your story was how Sid continued on even after there was a group of 20 and it dwindled down and he was challenged. And he just, in my words, led from his heart and carried on. And it took time and it worked. Worked for one, it worked for another.
Sure.
The connection. And I must say, it's in such sharp contrast to today, where there's this expectation of everything happening very quickly, a lot of manipulation of words and strategies and systems, and saying the right thing in the right way, showing up every day. It's like, it's an exhausting process.
Yes, it shouldn't be, actually. It should be simple, easy, and feeling the beauty, feeling the love. That's me talking, but that's the facts. And to carry on a little bit from that meeting and those Friday night meetings and the attraction of other people coming into it. And part of it, after a few months, is Sid had his first public talk, and that was a big success. Now the one with the 20 people in his living room, that's not the same thing. They got wind of a place called the New Age Center in Vancouver, and Sid and Barb went in there and they made an arrangement for Sid to talk, and they accepted it, and he was given a date. I believe it was in early January, after I met him, the following summer. But anyway, we were there. He wanted us there. We came. We were privileged to be there. And there might have been another couple, and I believe there was, that came along for this event. And I think there was about 50 people in there, and they were just strangers, searchers. And Sid made a very powerful talk. And when this was over, there were people actually that moved to Salt Spring, 2 or 3 at least. And out of it, then we worked. It went into a little what you call these weekends. It was a weekend, and it was in Vancouver. A lot of the people from that first talk appeared at this. There's probably over 20 people. People from Salt Spring came out too, and it was another beautiful success. And it was, Sid talking for a while, and then we'd go out for lunch or whatever, and then come back and do more. I believe it was an overnighter. I think we did it for about 2 days. And again, there was 4 or 5 people that showed up on Salt Spring. They just wanted more. They had been touched. So it started to build at a faster pace. And the next one was the Gathering of the Waves, which was the next big one. Mm. There were other visits then. There was a group forming on Main Island by Dave and Carol. They got neighbors involved, and actually one of the greatest teachers came from there. And there was a group in Nanaimo where Elsie still lived. And she had got this started, and Sid had been going over to there. And another one in Vancouver. But anyway, I'm not sure on the timing of these groups, whether they were before Gathering of the Waves or not. But Gathering of the Waves was a fabulous event in a sense. A whole bunch of us went out there with Sid and we stopped at Main Island on the way, picked up a few more. And there was probably 20 at least or more people that knew Sid and had been touched by Sid and wanted to support him. And in fact, even my wife and I were involved in actually setting that thing up. We had to take a trip into Vancouver, and nobody that we talked in terms of organizers were really open to having Sid there, because Sid was enlightened, and nobody could believe that there would be an enlightened man out on Salt Spring Island or anywhere in Canada. It was just like, you're crazy, And anyway, we invited this guy out to the island to meet Sid and so on, and it became set up. And so we all arrived there, and it was like a convention of various, Sufi dancers were there, tarot card readers were there, Hare Krishnas were there, and that was the kind of makeup of the crowd. And there was a lot of people there, at least 1,000 people. It was an outdoor event with a kind of a band shell or something to speak from. And they kept putting Sid off. And they would put somebody else in ahead of him. The organizers were still stalling. They were afraid it was going to cause conflict out there if Sid claimed enlightenment. However, he got to speak. And the place went quiet, and they all listened. And it was an incredibly high spiritual talk. And at the end of it, spontaneously, music started, and it was, will the circle be unbroken? And let's say 1,000 people held hands and danced around in a big circle. Very kind of trippy in a way, but actually really beautiful. And that was a big kickoff. That inspired others to come out to the island, and it was like the cat's out of the bag. It's real, and of course, it's only real to the ones that know it's real, that see it, that feel it. But that group was becoming substantial. And
Jim, if I could just jump in here, that first public meeting you're talking about in Vancouver was actually at an ashram, right? And
I guess you could call it that, Dave.
Well, they called it that. They called it an ashram.
Okay.
But that's beside the point. But there's a really neat story of healing that goes along with that particular meeting, and that is that after my dad finished his talk, he slipped out the side of the building with my mother. And they were walking down sort of an alleyway away from the building. And this young girl,
right,
she starts running towards him with her arms out.
Yes.
And they're both thinking to themselves, okay, what's going on? And she leaps into the air, literally leaps into the air, and she wraps her legs, or jumps up on him, wraps her legs around his waist like a child would do with a parent.
Yeah.
And she's she's in tears. And she said, I don't know exactly what she said, but words to the effect of, I'm healed. And it turns out that this young woman, who I think was in her late teens at the time, had been in foster care in a ward of the state and on various medications, and had really been suffering, really suffering with mental illness, and with trauma. And that one meeting changed her life. That one talk changed her life.
I know, Dave. Yes.
And I think you know who I'm talking about.
I do know who you're talking about. Yeah.
It's a absolutely beautiful story, and she remained very close in his heart till the end of his life. Actually,
yes, I know. Yeah, yeah. I remember a follow up to that. We were on Maui, and Sid had been watching afternoon TV that day, and I don't know where the talk show was. It might have been Vancouver, but it was a talk show, and it was. I believe 4 women that had been married to paraplegics.
Right.
And the interview was interviewing them and, exploring their experiences and how hard it was and, so on. And the first 3 particularly. But when they got to this lady, the interviewer says, well, you seem, in a different space here. You seem to be, happy rather than, needy or whatever, however you would put it. And she spoke very eloquently and talked about 3 principles and truth. And at that point said he hadn't recognized her until then. At that point, Sid recognized who it was, and she was married to a pastor. That's right, and we went over, happened to go over that night, and he that's all he could talk about. He was so gratified, so thrilled, so happy for her, and to see it coming back to him, on the media, so to speak. So that is an excellent observation.
And it's also an illustration of, again, in my opinion, why he felt that moving into psychology was important. It was because of like
we've just lost your audio there, Dave. If you could repeat that.
Well, I was saying it's an illustration of why my father moved into psychology in India, because of the people like this young girl who had been in therapy and been taken back into the hurt and her, the pain, the emotional pain, and it had been actually making her situation. He felt like that was a real travesty.
Yes.
To do that to a person, yeah,
for sure.
So we have a comment. Yeah. We have a comment in the chat. From Alan Flood, who says, thank you so much for your story, Jim. When I first encountered Sid in 1978, I felt more safe and at home than I'd ever felt in my life. His older tapes bring that feeling back every time. Thank you again.
Oh, that's very nice, Alan. Thanks for your comment. How are we doing for time before we put on the last of that?
I think we have time for a short question.
Okay.
Does it seem right? Yeah.
Yeah, we have time for one more question.
Or anybody... a shorter answer.
Or comment.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had said, if you want to share a story of how Sid's teachings have helped you, or any comments you want to make.
All right, I'm just going to very quickly share that I really appreciated the recording at the beginning. that distinction of what is of essence and just of appearance gave me something that in all the spiritual teaching I explored, I'd never heard. I heard it for the first time from listening to the principles. That it has no condition. There's nothing to be done, nowhere to be, no need to go anywhere. It's just a fact. And that came with a feeling of being at homeness that I never quite experienced in my life before. So I truly appreciate that clip.
Thanks so much, Michael. I look forward to the next part of it too. There's a little bit more to go. There's about another 10 minutes. And it's gratifying to hear that from you. And thanks for sharing.
Thank you so much.
Another comment from Paul Hickman. He says, good to hear Sydney talking in a more spiritual mode. All the times I've heard a Sid Banks vid or audio, he has been almost apologetic about mentioning God. Oh, he would refer to God, but appear to be a direct witness. I could be wrong, but this audio tonight left any hearer in no doubt whatever, that not only did he acknowledge God, but had a personal relationship with him. Thank you for this factual eye-opener, a great insight, which can be used to springboard off into the formless spiritual world. I read recently that it was easier to come out as being gay than it is to declare a spiritual awakening of any kind. COVID has caused a spiritual vacuum that we can really help people with their spiritual needs by being alive as a witness to the three principles. Thank you very much, Paul.
Oh, that's very eloquent. Beautiful words. Wonderful words of gratitude. Thanks, Paul, for contributing that.
That was
I would
nice.
just say on that one, Jim, that I was actually there when my father had his enlightenment experience. I wasn't like right next to him, but I was in the house at the time, and I do remember the event fairly well. And he did say, he repeated over and over afterwards, I'm home. And he did say to me that he felt like he had touched the hand of God.
Okay.
And that he had a form of spiritual death and rebirth.
Yes, I've heard that too.
Yeah.
Nice.
So there's no question at all that he felt like he actually reached that point of being one with the Creator.
Yes, indeed.
Mm-hmm.
And now I think it's time for us to play the second video.
Seen it, you know it, but there's never a name to knowing. Never. Never stop. Never falter. Keep wide open to new experiences. Don't let yesterday's thoughts stop you from reaching this place called heaven here on earth. You must keep open. And the more you keep open, do you know what that is? The more you keep open, and another word, it's called faith. And faith is power, whether knowingly or unknowingly, manifesting itself directly from what we call God. And the more you see the results, such as you people losing your sicknesses and all your problems and everything's been taken care of and your businesses will all be taken care of and you're taking care of your children, you know that. The more it proves itself, then the more courage you get to get deeper until someday the trust comes so much that you absolutely give up the search totally and just live in a world of true love and true understanding, knowing that Everything that happens will be absolutely perfect, and it will be. And it will be, because you'll find the secret to perfection. You find the secret to perfection. This is what Christianity does. It leads you to the perfection of life, beyond the mind, to the inside, and find this perfection of life. And as you travel down this road, you become your own psychologist and psychiatrist and theologian, because you're beyond anything like that. That's on the mind. We know better. Christianity's inside. It's just a calming of the mind and seeing now the perfection of now. For a microscopic second, this is what you call a flash or an insight. This is what we're searching for, is insights. Find it now. Honestly, that's the only time you'll find it. That's why it's been hidden for so many years. But and it's the only way you'll ever help the universe to get out the mess it's in, is by raising the level of conscious state of the universe. Then all the beauty will start to come out, and all the ignorance will start to fall away, and the problems that go with ignorance. It's a spiritual universe. You must go inside to the realization of this fact. Then you'll find your freedom. Then you'll find all the knowledge and all the love and all the understanding that you've ever dreamt of in your life. Sharing, really, honestly, is the greatest lubricant to help you to get to where you're going. Just makes things just slide. Sharing. And not sharing problems. Not sharing your past. You can do that anytime. But sharing the spiritual facts that have happened to you, or the spiritual facts that lie within yourself. That's what it's found. Not anybody else giving it to you. Nobody can give it to you. Do you know what you're really searching for? It's lost feelings. You're searching for lost feelings. Feelings that you forgot exist. Feelings that are so far beyond your imagination, they're long gone. And this is what you're searching for. So what we do is we try and search for information to try and find those feelings. Well, that's going backwards. You find the feelings. And these feelings turn your knowledge into a true reality. By accepting the very feeling with the knowledge, you step yet further into the state of meditation to realize more of God, more of life, more of happiness, more of the universe. Once again, you've risen a level of conscious state. Don't be afraid of feelings. Now, I don't mean to go around and prove to yourself that you've got feelings. It's nothing to do with outside feelings. It's inside feelings. It's feelings that you know that you don't have to go anywhere to find your happiness. That the feeling already exists. The only thing that you've hidden the feeling. It's really nice to have a meeting like this that you don't understand. Because you can guarantee the benefits are coming. They're just coming. It's supposed to be a happy life. If you know what makes the world tick. Not what makes the human being tick, but what makes the world tick. There lies the answer. That's the inside. The human being's outside. And the only way you can help a human being is to go inside and get all this information, then go outside and tell them. That's how you find the information. Well, anyway, we'll have a dance tomorrow. But don't be late, it's only half an hour.
You know, Jim, what came to mind to me listening to that, I'm going back to my father's comment after his enlightenment experience that I'm home.
Yeah.
And it occurred to me that we're all homeless. and that the spiritual journey is all about finding the spiritual home.
I love it, David.
Getting back home.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Very nice. I'd love to thank everybody here. Thanks so much, everyone in the room. Thanks for being here. Thanks for the opportunity. I've loved every minute of this, and I appreciate the reception and the sharing of the effect that it's having on everyone. It's just wonderful. It's David, thanks to you. I really have loved bonding with you deeper as we prepped for this, and I've loved the experience that we've shared right now as we presented it. So good on you, Dave.
Well, thank you, Jim, and thank you to everyone, and thank you for everyone who supported this. And the music was fabulous at the beginning, and thank you, Theo, for all your technical expertise. That little bit of music you heard at the end was it was fairly common originally my father they were called gatherings. When there was a gathering, spontaneous music was quite frequent.
Yeah.
And folk or gospel music, and it's, for me, I love hearing that. It's really beautiful.
Oh, it was great, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, thank you both. I just know how much it's going to help so many people. And we'll send you the comments after, because we're getting a lot of beautiful comments about this right now.
Linda, you've done a great job.
Thank you, Jim.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. And we'll have more of these. All right.
Oh, nice.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye,
have a beautiful day.
Yeah.